Hello, welcome to season 3 of the web show Perspectives Live, an initiative by Colleges and Institutes Canada, where we talk about different perspectives on issues that matter to you. I'm your host, Manjula Salvarajan, and so glad you could be with us. Today's episode, the first of the season, is on future-proofing Canada's labor market. We'll look at upskilling and reskilling Canada's labor market to meet the needs of today's workforce. It's such a timely topic. I'm sure that most of you have had either a work or a personal experience around seeing that labor shortage. I wish to acknowledge that this episode of Perspectives Live is being produced and broadcast from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Before we get started, CICAN would like to recognize the ongoing contributions of its corporate partners, BGIS, TD, and Scotiabank, who support these activities, including bringing you Perspectives Live in both English and French. Joining me now is CICAN's President and CEO, Denise Amio. Denise, how are you? It's good to see you, and you're wearing the fall colors. You're always on point that way.
Thank you very much, Manjula. I'm doing well, and I'm really happy that Perspective Lives is kicking off a third season. And as you know, so much has happened in the world since we signed off last June. And so we are not in a shortage of relevant topics to discuss, that's for sure.
Indeed. There's no shortage of it. And, the subject of our show today, labor market gaps, is really relevant to so many people. Anyone that's trying to build a home or care for an older parent has experienced this personally and really seen the challenges in supply chain and accessing skilled trades. So it's such a timely topic for both CICAN and its members, right?
Absolutely, Manjula. And at the start of the pandemic, we knew that the economy could be impacted by the pandemic for years. And but now we are in the middle of it. It is coming to life. And in many ways, I think that many of us didn't realize how many levels uh, this would impact all of us.
Mhm.
Whether it's because we were building a house or doing renovations or needed clinical care. And so what we're seeing is that the supply is not meeting the demand right now. And that's why I am very, very pleased that we have this episode, because I think it's a good opportunity to be able to share informations about key initiatives that we are involved with, but also to hear what are the best practices in different sectors. So if you allow me, I'll talk about maybe
Go
two
ahead.
one quick initiatives. And so the one I
Mhm.
will talk about is a national one. It's a supportive care assistant program that happened thanks to funding from the federal government. In a nutshell, what it is, it's a fully subsidized micro credit to attract and
Mm.
rapidly train new long-term care workers. This
Oh,
program,
wow.
it includes a 6 weeks of online training, followed by a paid work placement in a long-term care setting. And CICAN has also worked with its members, with provinces, territories, employers, workers' organizations to create a national occupational standard for the personal care provider role. And this standard will, in fact, serve as a reference point to help employees, help employers, as well as educators understand what workers need to know to succeed in their roles.
That is such an interesting initiative and really timely. You and I think a lot of the people that are listening here we saw that need, really. We saw that need through the pandemic. Are there programs that you have that are directed at employers?
Absolutely. If you allow me, I'll talk about two very quickly. So, the first one is what we
Mhm.
called our Career Launcher Internship Program. So, what it does, it connects employers with skilled students and graduates by providing up to $32,000 towards an intern's salary as well as the training expenses. And we launched last week our latest Career Launcher Apprenticeship Incentive Program, which provides, in this case, small and medium sized businesses with financial incentives to offset the hiring and training costs. And in this one, there will be up to 6,000 new apprentices in 39 Red Seal construction and manufacturing trades.
Mm.
So substantial amounts, as you can see, and it's
Mhm.
also
Yes.
more funding if it is women, indigenous people, newcomers, persons with disabilities, and racialized communities. And lastly, I cannot not talk about one of our newest, which is, again, thanks to financial support of the federal government. It is skills enhancement for newcomers, because often we hear the challenge that newcomers have to integrate into the workplace. So, again, this is a national initiative to help newcomers to optimize their existing skills and ensure that they can successfully integrate into the Canadian labor market. In a nutshell, three micro credits to develop and implement soft skills for them. One is in communication, another one in collaboration, and thirdly in adaptability.
I love that these are noted. You've identified areas where there are issues and really targeted them, and with great timing. You've talked about the career launcher internship program and this skills enhancement for newcomers. A great way to start this discussion, given the topic of today's episode.
Absolutely, because all sectors are facing labor shortage right now. And it's not only in Canada, but it's all around the world, no matter where you go almost. And so we will be able today to talk about how colleges and institutes have adapted and continue to adapt to these shortages. And we'll hopefully get new ideas about how to move it even further.
Thank you, Denise. I'm really excited to be talking about this. And you'll be back with us. I'm going to introduce our panel now, but you'll be back with us later. You'll be joined by Dennis Johnson, the president and CEO of the College of Caledonia, who's also a member of the CICAN board of directors. Thank you. We'll see you back in about half an hour. Uh, right now, I'm really excited to welcome our guests. Sue Wastell is the vice president and soon to be president of the Homebuilders Association. Jodi Hall is CEO at Canadian Association Long-Term Care. Joao Santos is senior expert with the European Commission. Welcome to our roundtable.
Thank you for
It's
having
good
us.
to have you with us. It's this is you've heard Denise say it. I've said it. This is in the news. You hear of all of quitting, of job changes, of people talking about running into labor shortages in their small businesses and their big businesses, even in getting things done in their personal lives. So let's start start off broader. What are some trends that you're seeing in the job market that you think are here to stay, ones that impact the post-secondary sector? Joao, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. It's past 7 o'clock in Europe now, but it's always a pleasure to contribute to your events. Well, I would say that there are certain when we're talking about trends, there are certain trends that are difficult to anticipate, like the disruptive change we had with the COVID pandemic and the invasion of Russia of Ukraine and the impact it's had in the European labor market, because we have more than 6 million Ukrainians that, from one day to the other, had to flee from the war and come to Europe. So what I mean is that there are a certain amount of unexpected change that is difficult to foresee, but there are others which we can foresee, we can plan for, and I would mention, of course, the green and digital transition in Europe. It's sort of the driving force for a new economic model we want to foster in Europe. We have demographic change, or the trends in demography, which are also posing quite big challenges for the education and training sector and the labor market. You see an aging population, I think, in Canada as well. And you have situations where in some professions, some sectors, the average age of people working in those sectors is quite high, which means that in the next 10, 20 years, there will be millions of people retiring, and we don't have the enough youth to replace these people. So these are big challenges we have. And of course, the labor shortages, we see also quite a lot of imbalance in demand, which also shows that in terms of labor market policies, labor mobility maybe we need to do something in that in order to make sure that we have the systems working in a way in which where there's these imbalances of a lot of supply and less demand, where these things can happen. And of course, this goes beyond education and training, because it has to do, with housing policies, with the transferability of social security rights, and so on. So, but what I'm trying to say is that in order to address the skill shortages and in order to address these challenges we have in the labor market, we've got to go beyond simply looking at skills. Of course, skills is extremely important, and that's our business. That's why we're having this event today. But we have to coordinate education and training policies or skills policies with other wider elements that have also an influence on this.
That's fact that you're talking about seeing the skill not in traditional industries, but seeing them in industries that are sort of growing, like the transition to green and green. So that's fascinating. Sue, let me you, and I'll come to Jodi after that too. Can you talk to me about the trends that you're seeing in your sectors?
Sure. So certainly I don't think anyone was expecting the housing boom that we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. I know that housing starts have been increasing since about 2017 at a very rapid rate, but we were not expecting the amount of sales and demand that we saw sort of starting off in March or April of 2020. And we just really weren't prepared for that. So certainly a trend that we're seeing is the need for more construction skilled tradespeople. We are an aging out employer, and we need over 100,000 new skilled tradespeople in the next 10 years in Ontario just to account for those that are retiring. The Canadian and provincial governments have certainly recognized the fact that we need more homes across the country. In fact, we need to build over 3.5 million new homes in the next 10 years. And that's something that we've never done in the past. So we are about to try to double the amount of new homes being constructed over what we typically do. So how are we going to do it? And how can we get more bodies, more people in the construction trades? Another trend I would say is that we're sort of a second chance skill job. So the average age is 29 of people getting into construction skilled trades. which is quite high. In other countries across the world, like the UK, it's 16. So people are, going through other pathways through their education after they finish high school, and then once they may realize that wasn't quite for them,
And then
coming
jumping to this.
back in. So we need to work on.
That's interesting. And very quickly, you mentioned that you have an aging workforce. What's the average age of workers in the construction industry?
If I look at just journeymen alone, which is just one segment of our skilled labor, in 2016, the average age of almost 50% was 55 years old.
Wow. Okay. So you've made your point. Wow. Okay. I was expecting a younger number. That's interesting. So of course you can say an aging workforce as well. Jodi, very quickly before we start talking about solutions, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in your industry?
Yeah, definitely some shared points that my other panel peers have just made. Retirements. We like has already been shared. We have an aging workforce in senior care in Canada, so it's a critical topic for us as we look for what our needs will be over the next decade. And of course, on top of that, the impact that we have with the current shortages in our workforce. The latest StatsCan data that just came out about 3 weeks ago is showing that we have 38,000 vacancies in nursing and residential care homes across the country. So that's a significant number for us to address. And of course, the lens for all of this is the ongoing effects of the pandemic. Certainly very painful experience for long-term care over the last 2.5 years. And we're continuing to walk that path as, we continue to see outbreaks of COVID. And so, how that impacts the perceptions about a career in long-term care and healthcare overall are very real.
So I am going to come back to talking about perceptions around both of these sectors. Let's transition to talking about solutions now. What are some interesting models or best practices you've seen in terms of developing a workforce, in terms of training a workforce, ones that you would like colleges and institutes do or ones that they already do? Jodi.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because the workforce for long-term care in particular is very female dominated. Certainly well over 90% of our workforce are women. So looking at a way to attract men and perhaps address some of what may be perceptions or stigma around men working in a caring profession, I think is a really key opportunity for us in Canada. I have noted some programming that's available in Europe that focuses on developing men in care. So it's something that I think the colleges could certainly play a key role in. We know that mental health, and I think that's for all Canadians, not just long-term care, but it definitely is a critical issue for us in the long-term care sector, making sure that people are equipped with knowledge on how to self-care, how to be caring and supportive to their peers, and how to kind of build their own mental health resiliency every day, I think is a critical skill set that will be needed for the future and a needed solution for sure. And as Canada continues to develop strategies for its workforce development, we've seen the recent examples where immigration policy is changing and will certainly be welcoming new comers to Canada. And so that also means that our workforce will continue to change and become more diverse. So cultural sensitivity and making sure that people are prepared and ready to work with people with all kinds of different backgrounds and worldviews.
Thank you. Sue, I'd like to pull you into the discussion. What are some models and best practices that you've seen work?
So we have, skilled trades days that the colleges and high schools can partner on to help promote skilled trades. and furthering their education after high school. We also, ourselves as our industry are so concerned about it that we're doing our own things as well. So, for example, Quality here in Ontario has a program that is excellent and is just entering its second year. It's called the Job Ready program. And what it does is it takes people who maybe in that age group of, their late 20s or beyond that would like to try out and get into a skilled trade. And it sort of trains them up very quickly within, I think, between 4 and 6 weeks, and gets them all their safety training, all of their working from heights, WMIS, everything that they would need, as well as the equipment that they would need, whether it's work boots and safety gear, and then partners them directly with a builder or developer or a tradesperson to get them right on the job right away. So that has been very successful last year. I believe there was about 300 or 400 people that entered the workforce that otherwise we wouldn't have seen before. So that's been a huge success, and they have initiated that program to continue this year.
I like that. Joao, you're hearing about some of these models. I would love to bring your perspective and that international perspective to this. What are some things that you've seen that you think we can replicate?
Yeah, well, I'm not dealing with one specific sector, unlike Sue and Jodi, so I cannot give you this kind of insight that they are giving on what is happening in their particular sectors. I'm working more on a policy level with the 27 European Union member states, and what I can tell you is, the kind of actions that we are putting forward together with the member states. And I would say that we are looking more at the systemic level. How can we ensure that we have effective skills ecosystems throughout Europe that are responding to these challenges and to the trends that we spoke about at the opening of this event? And I would say that one of the most important elements we have is trying to build quality and on-time skills needs and anticipation systems, so that we understand in what direction society is going, in what direction the economy is going, and we are capable of having systems that can capture these major changes that are happening in the market. So understanding basically where demand is going. Another element which is important is not only understanding where things are going, but then being capable of developing systems, education systems that are responsive, that are very quick, very agile in providing solutions for these challenges that are out there. So we need systems that are capable of not only anticipating what will happen in the future, but make sure, and this is quite difficult because traditionally the education system has time to catch up with changes. If you look at the past 20, 30 years or even longer, what happened is that society sometimes changed very quickly and the education system had time. You could establish working groups, you could see what are the needs and then prepare the teachers. You had time. You cannot do that any longer. Things have to be much more in responding to these changes. A third element of these effective skill systems on which we are working is on cooperation and partnerships. I think that more than ever, society in general has to understand that if companies want to solve the problem, and in Europe, we have around 40% of the companies that say they don't find the people with the skills that they need. Now, the problem is that maybe some decades ago, companies could sit back and expect the education system to provide them with the people with the skills they need. I think that change is so fast nowadays that companies, instead of just complaining that the education system doesn't provide them with the people with the skills they need, they've got to be part of the education and training system. They have to engage with the community colleges, with the universities, with the vet centers in Europe, and they have to offer possibility of apprenticeships, of internships, help the education system understand what are those future skill needs. So this element of cooperation and partnership, I'm not just talking about like it used to be done before, that companies or community colleges would get in contact with companies and make sure that they had the offer of internship or whatever. It's going much deeper than this. It has to go beyond that. It has to really be a relation in which these partners are together, understanding where things are going and developing solutions for that right away. And a last element of these effective skills ecosystems, I would say, is the need for investment. And I'm not talking only about public and private investment in the education and training system. Of course, community colleges, vocational centers in Europe, universities need investment to adopt new technologies to improve the teaching and learning process. But also companies need to invest much more in upskilling and reskilling. We know that most of the upskilling and reskilling, in fact, happens in the context of companies. It's not that the adults go and sit at the desk, in traditional school. So companies have to understand that in order for them to maintain their competitiveness and innovation potential, they have to invest much more in skills than they used to do before. And of course, there's also a very important place for personal and individual investment. The individuals, if they want to maintain their employability, and they also have to think. It's not only expected that the public system will provide them with all the possibilities, but to also see themselves and how do they want to invest in their future career to maintain their employability. So, I'm sorry, I cannot tell you precisely on one sector or another how they are doing it
No,
because I'm not
that's
working with the sectors. But this is a kind of global policy approach that we are trying to put in place with the European member states.
I think that was an excellent answer. What you're talking about is a time of change. Things are changing so rapidly that I think that institutions have to have their ear to the ground and have to be really agile. You've pointed that out, and let me take that and put that to you, Sue. I mean, we're not talking about yes, we have to deal with housing supply and all of these goals that the construction in 5 years and 10 years, but there's a backlog right now. So, there's a backlog that needs to be addressed right now, and there is a tie to the supply chain, but there is a tie to the issue of skilled trades as well. So what would you like to see a post-secondary institute to alleviate the backlog on construction?
Well, I think certainly more promotion. I don't see enough promotion when it comes time for high school students to make those decisions and really get into those high schools, guidance counselors' offices, right in front of the students to make it a fair choice for them and something educating them so that they can make a great decision for their future. I think too, just with innovation. So it's something that we're looking towards in our industry, and the way in which we're going to be building houses in the future is going to change because we know we will not have enough bodies to build and construct homes the way we do right now. So there will be, necessary changes at the college levels to innovate in order for us to move towards, more modular housing, panelization, and offering those skills to students. Would be a great step up for those, because that is the way that we will be moving towards in the future in order to accommodate the supply need that we have.
Jodi, that's made me think of this idea of perception, actually, because but Sue mentioned that we need to be talking to people right when they're in high school and promoting these ideas and these opportunities to students in high school. Let's talk about the perception around these careers. Mm-hmm. Trades and apprenticeships are respected in other parts of the world. Do you think that there's a perception problem here? And if so, how continue to recognize these trades and frontline care jobs as great career choices? How can we address that issue of the perception problem around these careers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I couldn't agree more with Sue on the need for further career promotion when, certainly in the high schools, but even for Canadians that are at different points of transition throughout their career, that, senior care is a very viable career option. This is an incredibly important role. It's very meaningful, and, you have a tremendous impact on the lives of individuals every day. And I think sometimes that the role isn't perhaps as valued. I think that there's a greater sense of that with what's been shared through the pandemic. And certainly I'd love to see further promotion there's millions of exchanges that occur between, a personal support worker, for example, and a resident every single day. And so many wonderful moments that are not defined by some of the very tragic experiences through the pandemic. And so would very much love to see kind of that highlighted and what the role really is about and how important it is and enriches people's lives every day.
And I would imagine also showcasing, and I would also that showcasing to students that that if you do become a PSW, there are opportunities beyond that. Is that happening? Are there pathways to ladder up to other things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are some examples across the country where there's, I guess, laddering programs that are in place that allow people to continue to evolve their career, moving from a PSW to a practical nurse level to an RN. I'd love to see further kind of development of that and a broader availability across the country. And, the point that was made earlier about this relationship between colleges and employers, I think is so critical as we continue to think about how do we evolve the development of a workforce in Canada. And there really is kind of a shared responsibility with employers as well, as we think about, how can we further develop perhaps apprenticeships that are in the caring profession, not just in the traditional trades area. And there are some really great examples of co-op programs with high school students and an employer and a college that's equipping students to come out with the skills needed to be a personal care provider. So I think there's a really tremendous opportunity as we look to the next several years ahead about how we can think differently about developing our workforce.
So, Joao, before I bring on others, I'll ask you, and we may not have a ton of time to get into it, but I've got to ask you this. Is immigration the magic bullet here?
Well, that's a good question because many people think that immigration is the magic bullet. I think it is one of the elements of the solution. I think, if we want to address the labor shortages, and let me just say that, if we think of it, it's quite curious that we are now speaking so much about labor shortages. And just a few years ago, the debate was very much on how computers and artificial intelligence and robotization would make humans irrelevant, and there would be no jobs left. Famous thinkers were writing books on humans not needed for jobs and so on. And incredible, if you just look at it just after a few years, and now we all, in Canada, in Europe, the same thing, we're talking about the lack of labor force and labor shortages. But just to say, immigration, answering your question, clearly immigration is one of the answers, but I don't think it is the only answer because it also has some costs and even social costs. But I would say that, we have to focus on 5 areas, basically. One of them is, of course, and I think it was Sue or Jodi that already mentioned it, innovation and increasing productivity through innovation, and this has a lot to do with the digital transition and using digital tools in order to increase productivity of companies. I think another element is attracting more people to the labor market, even without immigration. But local people, women are quite underrepresented in the labor market in many countries. You have disadvantaged groups of migrants in Europe. You have the Roma population that have low employability levels. So we also have something to do on active aging. Quite a lot of people still have the traditional idea that when you get around 60 years of age, you should retire. And I think that, because of life expectancy, because of quality of life, people can continue in being active in the labor market for much longer than before. I think there's a lot of opportunities for reskilling and upskilling, especially in sectors that are disappearing. So people that had skills for a certain sector that risk going into unemployment if we don't have adequate responses in terms of reskilling these people. And if we're talking about labor shortage, we've got to make sure that we don't lose an opportunity of reskilling someone and giving them an opportunity in a different sector that maybe is growing. And I would say that immigration is clearly one of these solutions, but to answer your question, clearly not the only one.
It can't be the only one. It is something that has to be addressed as and the post sections can play a big doing that. And having said that, let me invite two more guests to the table. Denise, who we heard and CEO of CICAN. Hi, Denise. And Dennis Johnson, who's the president and CEO of the College of New Caledonia. Good to have you with us, Dennis.
Thank you.
So we've talked about a lot here. We've talked about upskilling, reskilling. We've talked about track programs. We've talked about how we can have, make sure that the immigrants transition them into the workforce. A ton of ideas here. Could I get both of you? Maybe I'll start with you, Dennis, to reflect on what you've done so far.
Well, it's very clear from the panelists that there is no one solution, but a lot of what they're saying we talk about quite often. And what's missing is a holistic, system-wide approach to this. The ministers of health just met and they focused on the health sector, but I think Canada really needs that approach across all career sectors, all opportunities. There are a lot of policy barriers. There's a lot of disconnects between federal and provincial policy. And often our sector is not aligned to the current job opportunities. So I think there needs to be a much broader national conversation. CICAN is certainly part of that conversation, but it needs to continue.
I like that, the idea of aligning to get a true understanding of what the needs are, because they seem so much more immediate now, right? Denise.
So what I would say, I fully agree with what Dennis has said. Maybe I'll give two examples that illustrate what can be done with what some of the three panelists have said. So Joao talked about innovation and he talked about reskilling and upskilling. So let me share a story with you quickly. So Humber College had an issue because they wanted someone to make one of their building to have it retrofitted, but net zero. No construction company in Toronto could do it. They approached everybody, nobody could do it. And at one point it dawned on them, hey, we're a training institution. So what if we approach a construction company and tell them, we will help you to train your workforce in how to retrofit into a net zero fashion? Guess what? That building has been retrofitted net zero. Now the company not only solved that issue, solved the issue of the college by retrofitting their building, but it's a new business line for them. And now they have retrofitted 5 other buildings in the Toronto region. So this is a good example of innovation, the private sector, and upskilling and reskilling all working together with a college. On another spectrum, it's Mary talked about the need to promote and attract. I think that's the way it was said. So I want to talk about an approach that is being done right now in the college, but not in all the colleges. And I really think it could be part of the solution for many sectors. So what they do is they offer dual credits between high school and college. And so a student can take a course that will have credits for his high school and for his maybe college if he goes to college. And this is being done especially for youth at risk across the country. In Quebec, they do it for the high performers, but in the rest of the country, they do it for youth at risk. And what is fascinating is that it builds confidence in the youth about, wow, I can succeed in post-secondary. And it attracts them to pursue their studies. and even graduate from high school because they have a line of sight suddenly. They see what could be done. And for parents, it's even more magical because often the parents, they didn't think that post-secondary was an option because neither of them had done it. So I really hope there would be more of those dual credits across the country because I think it is also part of the solution.
I like those ideas. I like those ideas. Let's talk a little bit about. I mean, we touched on Joao touched on immigration and kind of placed it in the big bucket of solutions that we need to address. We have Canada's Foreign Credential Recognition Program. It helps to assess and recognize international credentials and work experience. Anyone here can weigh on this. I think that Dennis, I'm going to start with you. What role do you think colleges and institutes can play to help fast track foreign trained workers to the labor market in all of these in demand jobs?
Well, colleges and institutes have always played a key role in skills. If we go back 50, 60 years, the sector was created to address skills. Universities existed, but colleges and institutes are mostly a fairly new innovation. So we play a key role, and we offer very relatively quick entry into skilled sectors. So, basically, if the students come, we can provide the training that industry needs, that the future of Canada needs. The challenge, again, as was talked about earlier, is demographics. People are frankly competing for the same group of declining youth. The statistics are very clear. Canada's youth population is in decline, and immigration, although it's not the only solution, is absolutely key. And that's why I was saying earlier, we need a holistic solution that includes policy at federal and provincial levels so that people, whether they're international or whether they're domestic students, can get the programs they need within the colleges and institutes. And so we have a bit of a mismatch. It's been talked about quite a bit in the past, but we have students that want to get into programs that are full. We have other programs that are not full because there's not enough interested students. So we need to step back and align what we're providing with the actual needs of the future of Canada.
Joe,
So
go ahead, Denise.
maybe I could give some example of what is being done that I think is quite successful for immigrants arriving is what we call PLAR, which is prior learning assessment of recognition. And but many immigrants do not know that this exists. They do not know that they could go to a college and be PLAR'd, if you want, in a given sector where they do have skills and where they do have experience and expertise. And so this is a way also to accelerate their entry into the Canadian labor market. There are other examples, and I'll just give one. In nursing, for example, we know again it's a big shortage, and we do have some of our colleges that what they do, they offer 1 year training upgrade with respect to Canadian context and the health sector in nursing. So it means that a nurse that is graduated from their respective country, they don't need to go through a 3 or 4 years again, but it's a quick 1 year that allow them to be able to be functional as a nurse. And there are a number of colleges across the country that are offering this from coast to coast to coast, basically.
We've talked this idea of speed, right? To find ways to get students that are interested into these industries with some kind of speed. Jodi, Sue, can your industries, can your sectors respond to that kind of speed? Is that because of post-secondary institutions to ramp things up?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging for long-term care because we require a skilled workforce. So, the ability to have rapid solutions is challenging. So certainly, as we've talked about, immigration is one of those items that are on our list as a shorter term solution that we can pursue. But I think it's also important as we not only simply recruit people to come to Canada and to be employed in long-term care, but we are able to look at that ethically and to make sure that we're supporting people to be employed as quickly as possible and not facing barriers, whether it's through difficult processes or other challenges. So I really appreciate the efforts that have been kind of outlined that the colleges are pursuing in Canada to support people who are here with health credentials. Would even wonder if we could pursue something that would be kind of in partnership with colleges that are outside of Canada, where programming could be delivered and people are prepared to meet some of the regulatory requirements before they even arrive in Canada. So, would love to see kind of some evolution about how do we continue to speed up and work with all of the stakeholders in that front, and certainly would welcome an opportunity to be part of the solution on that.
Sue, that to you. I keep hearing this idea of the need for speed. Can your industry react to that kind of speed? Is that what your expectations are?
Yes, I think we would be completely reactive to taking on more skilled trades labor help. It's certainly, at the top of our minds, and what we need to do what we need to do in the upcoming years. I know that a lot more companies are looking to help out with co-ops, whether it's in the high school levels or the college levels. Now more so than ever, to try to fill some of those gaps that we have within our companies, because everyone that I know has job postings out there that are not being filled. There's just people are not even applying. So we are at that point now where we would be happy to assist in any way that we can to get more feet on the ground. And help our companies and the population of future homeowners in Canada get an affordable home that they need in the future.
Well, it's interesting because I think we said it a while ago that on this call that if you look at other countries, people get into the industry. I think you said into the construction industry when they're 17, but in Canada it's when they're 29. Well, that's interesting, right? That's the jump. What is that you can you don't have to wait till they're 29 for it to be a second career, that they realize it earlier on. Denise, let me ask, talking about getting people into the workforce right away because there's this great, that's what employers want, and to a certain degree that's what workers want too, but workers and students also expect to be future proof. Like, you want not to be prepared for 6 months but for the next years. How are colleges and institutes addressing that need?
So, for us to think about reskilling and upskilling has always been part of our DNA. Often we call it continuing education. And Joao initially talked about the individual responsibility and the employer responsibility to help with reskilling and upskilling. So it means that people need also to take charge. Nowadays, there are so many of our colleges that offer what we call hybrid training. So it means people can even do it from home. And we saw during the pandemic that there were more people that were between 35 and 45, in fact, taking courses. The reasons for that, it was because I believe of that flexibility. One of the issue, though, is often the funding to do so. Currently, there is no like training passport like some of the country have done, where the individual have a certain amount of money that they could dedicate to their training. So the federal government announced something just 1 month, I think, or 6 weeks before the pandemic was declared. And then nothing happened with that training benefit for obvious reasons. But I would not be surprised if in the next budget, we see something like that coming to fruition. And I believe that Canadians will take advantage of it. That said, I really think that funding like that need to include PLAR, so that the costs to do your prior learning assessment recognition could be covered in that. Because again, this is a way to accelerate your training. The second thing I could say, and some of our members have taken I forgot how you say that in English, but have been very active or proactive. There's a big need now in Canada for childcare educators because of the new funding at $10 a day for daycare. But guess what? You cannot just put the kids there. You need to have people that are well trained for that. So we have about 8 of our members in the north of Ontario that are offering 10 weeks course online, flexible, at no cost to attract people in the field and hopefully convince them to pursue in that career. And on another end, I remember when in Prince Edward Island, there was the government, gave a 1 year for all childcare educators to be officially trained, but there were already people that were doing those jobs, but without necessarily the official skills. So what the college did over there, Holland College, they offered program during the weekend and at night in order for the people to stay in their jobs, but also being able to pursue their studies. They didn't lose people. In fact, it's the opposite. It attracted other people in the field. So the bottom line is talk to a college. They have solutions to offer to you. And we have colleges all over the country in 700 locations. So no employer can say, oh, but there's nobody in my neighborhood.
It's interesting, thank you, Denise. Coming back to what you said about the hybrid or the remote learning, I think that could really be individual because they, sort of over 80% of Indigenous people live within 50 kilometers of a college or institute, but transit is still a problem. So this might be a way to kind of bridge that gap to, a need that industry has, but you're also addressing a need that these communities have.
Absolutely. And there's also international students. Canada is blessed with, a very high number of international students that want to come to study in Canada because of the quality of our education system and the possibility to also work depending on the number of years that they have studied in Canada. But that said, right now, the federal government program for co-op or summer jobs are not available to international students. So why is that? So we need people like Jodi and Sue to say to the government, look, the international students need to be eligible for those programs as well.
Thank you. Having said that, we probably should at some point get a final word. We have a really captive audience here. You have leaders from college institutes, other people that are stakeholders and regions that are listening. So I'd like to go around the table here and get some. Sue, I'll start with you. you like, you know the industry, you're a leader in the construction industry. What would you like to pass on as a message to the leaders that are listening about what you'd like to see?
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me today, first of all. I think the one thing that I could just say that that we would, as an industry, just love to see is for colleges to promote just how great our industry really is to as many people as you can. I know that it's something we do because we're so passionate about our jobs. These are a lot of family businesses and generational and all of that, but we just need more help in getting the word out there that students can enter an amazing job where you can grow to become your own boss, have flexibility, and really see an outcome for what you do every day. And that would just be my last two cents.
Thank you, Sue. Jodi.
And again, thank you for the opportunity to offer our comments today. Some closing thoughts I would say is just really focusing in on the opportunity for innovation and working in partnership with long-term care employers. I think that there's a bigger opportunity for collaboration to rebuild the workforce that we need. And, we need support through promotion of careers in senior care as being a very viable career choice and a very meaningful one for people. And we'd love to see, if there's a strategy that could be developed to make sure that no one is ever left on a wait list. And I know the complexities that come with that about finding placements, but would love to find a collaborative opportunity that, if there is a qualified person on a wait list, they're never left there. We're at such a critical time in long-term care. There's many questions about the sustainability of long-term care if we do not address our workforce. So would love to just see a really close partnership continuing from here.
Thank you. Joao, you get the last word, and I think you have something like 20 seconds to say it. What would you like to say?
Okay, well, of course, thank Denise and the Canadian friends for inviting me once again to these. It's always interesting to participate in these international events because we realize that challenges we have in Europe are very much shared in other places of the world, in particular Canada. But if there's one thing I would recommend for the education system that we all be much more attentive to, is the understanding that skills is not only a challenge for the education sector, that companies have a very important role to play in working with us, in making sure that we deliver what they need, and this concept of partnerships, of collaboration, going far beyond just collaboration between schools and community colleges and universities, but really a societal understanding that skills is our collective challenge. And in order to deliver what society needs, we need partners to work with us. In isolation, there's no chance of us being capable of updating our systems in order to respond to what is the demand out there. We need society to join education so that everyone understands skills is a joint endeavor for all.
Perfect. A perfect collaboration, a great way to end this. Thank you all. Really appreciative, great insights. And for those of you who tuned in, what do you think of what you've heard today? CICAN would love to hear from you. Please send your perspective and questions on today's discussion to the email that you see on the screen, and stay on top of the latest developments in Canada's college sector. You can, if you want to do that, you can visit CICAN's news center, where you can subscribe to Perspectives by the electronic newsletter. I'd like to thank our roundtable, Dennis Johnson, President and CEO of the College of New Caledonia, Sue Wastell, President of the Canadian Homebuilders Association, Jodi Hall, CEO of the Canadian Long-Term Care, and Joao Santos, a senior expert with the European Commission, and of course, Denise Amiot, who's always here with a lot from us all. And I to start Wednesday, December the 7th on your calendars for next month's Perspectives Live. As you know, COP27, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, is going on right now. So we'll be looking at how colleges and institutes can rise to the challenge of reaching net zero carbon neutrality by 2030. That'll be a spirited discussion as well. Until then, visit the Perspectives Live page where you can watch or rewatch all of our past episodes. My name is Manjula Salvaraja. Such a pleasure having this discussion again. Thank you for joining us. Take care.